Now this is what the Tuttio Soleil should have came like from the factory.
What's up guys, welcome back to Pat Outdoors. Today we're going to be working on the Tuttio Soleil. I'm just going to be doing some visual upgrades along with installing some custom LED lighting, so a hardwired headlight and a fully functional brake lamp. We're also going to be answering some frequently asked questions from my previous videos about this bike. So this is my Tuttio Soleil, which we've made a few minor modifications on. You know, obviously we took the front fender off. I just didn't like the way it looks. Added a front number plate, a smaller rear sprocket, 72 volt, 20 amp hour Amorge battery. Made some changes to the far driver settings to get this thing to hit 50 miles per hour. But I recently started having an issue with the Amorge battery where it completely cuts power when it gets below half charge. And I've actually had a similar issue with it in the past when I had it running with an outboard motor a couple months ago. It's over 2 years old, so I'm not too surprised that it might be having an issue at this point. So we're actually gonna be going back to the 48 volt battery, and then we're gonna be answering a common question I get, which is how fast could this bike go with a 48 volt battery, just tuning the far driver setup with everything else left the same. I also often get asked what front fenders fit the Tuttio, since the factory one is not very visually appealing. I've even had some people comment and claim that I put it on backwards, that's why it looks funny, but it's a 3-bolt pattern, 3 holes at the bottom of the triple tree, so it only goes on one way. But I did find a fender that has a similar bolt pattern, which we're gonna try out and see how it fits. This front fender is actually designed for a Honda CRF 50. I just got this aftermarket one from Amazon for like 15 bucks. And as you can see, the bolt pattern is exactly the same as the Tuttio, but the main difference is there is a bulge here on top of the stock fender, and that's for the wire harness that goes through the bottom side of the fork. So we're gonna have to likely notch this portion of the fender just to make sure that there's enough clearance for the wire harness. Yep, just cutting that notch made enough clearance for the harness, so we should be able to bolt this on now. And here's a closer look at how that looks, mounted on the fork. I think it looks a lot better than the stock one. And here's what the bottom side looks like. The harness just has enough clearance, so there's no pressure on it. The next thing I want to replace is the handlebar pad. I just think that it feels really loose and flimsy. And I actually don't know why it's this narrow when the bar is clearly 9 inches wide. This is 8 inch, so there's always gonna be a lot of play. I'm gonna be going with a Pro Taper 10 inch, which I know is too wide, but I'm gonna trim down the sides just to make sure that it fits nice and snug. I actually have the same one on my Razor SX500 ski bike, and it fits nice and snug on there. I really like how that looks, so we're gonna do the same thing. Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do some trimming. I'm probably gonna start by cutting off about 1/2 inch on each side. Yeah, there's a big difference in this Pro Taper one. It's definitely got a lot more dense feel to it versus the original one. Another nice thing about it, it's got this split at the bottom, so you don't have to unbolt this every time that you're gonna be taking it off. That was the exact length that I was going for. If you are interested in getting more information on all the products that we're using for today's project, I'll have everything linked in the description below. Nice and firm, very minimal play. And it looks a lot better. Kind of going with the satin and gloss black theme that I'm going for. So the bike is already starting to look a little better, but I think it's just still way too much orange for me between the fork, the logo on the frame, the rear shock, and the wheels. Like the chrome spokes with the orange rims are just simply way too loud for me. I think painting the wheels gloss black would definitely make the biggest change in how this bike looks. To take the rear wheel off, it's pretty simple. The axle bolt is a 14 millimeter and the nut on the left side is a 17. In case you're wondering, this is an aftermarket sprocket. I have a 53 tooth on there. I was just experimenting with different gearing for speed. Same thing applies for the front wheel, just a 14 millimeter for the axle, 17 mil for the nut. Next, we're gonna prep these wheels for paint. I'm gonna start by removing the valve stem cores with the original valve stem cap. Just gonna unscrew it counterclockwise, take out the core, fully deflate both tires, and then we're gonna sand down the rims and wipe down the wheels with acetone, get this thing prepped for the base coat. Now I'm going to show you a quick, easy trick I learned to mask the whole rim using a garbage bag. First, I start by finding the center of the garbage bag, line that up with the axle, pinch it, and then I'm going to hold it up to the center just until I get to right at the end of the spoke. I'm going to cut the center off. So this is what I'm cutting off essentially. So you can see it's a lot smaller than the outer rim diameter, but the whole goal is to get the bag to fit real tightly inside the rim. Here's a closer look at how everything is masked. Came out very clean. It's definitely a lot easier than having like a bunch of index cards like I've seen some other people do. And then I just mask the center because I don't want to paint the bearings. Then I'm just using some Rust-Oleum wheel-specific spray paint, which is supposed to be a lot more durable. And here's what the final product looks like. Actually turned out pretty nice considering I am not a professional by any means. Just gonna touch up a couple small spots along the inside edges, and then I'm gonna re-inflate the tires to 18 PSI just to rebeat them, and then we're gonna throw the rotors and sprocket back on, put them back on the bike. Wow, This is quite a different look just by changing the wheel color from orange to black. It's kind of what I imagined the Tuttio Soleil should have looked like coming out of the factory. If you're enjoying today's video so far, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you like this kind of content, want to see more DIY modifications on all sorts of different bikes, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn your bell notification on. I always get asked how to install a headlight or a taillight on a Razor. So I figured I might as well show you how to do it on this bike that doesn't have either of them, since the process is exactly the same. Now I want to focus on all the components that we're using for the lighting project, starting with this tail lamp. This is just a universal enduro style dirt bike tail lamp housing with built-in turn signals. I've used this on so many projects, including my latest MX650 build. This is just plastic bonder by JB Weld. I'm just going to use that to fuse this onto the bottom side of the rear fender. I'll go over that in more detail shortly. This is a handlebar mounted on-off switch for all the lighting stuff. This is by Nilight. I've used the same brand on so many different lighting components for my cars and my bikes. It's always been super reliable, so I'm sticking with the brand. This is a voltage step-down converter. This is going to convert the 48 volts coming out of the stock battery into 12 volts just to run these 12-volt accessories on the bike. Obviously, it's going to be wired parallel, so it's not going to affect any 48-volt components. And this is a Nilight LED light bar that I've been using as a headlight on multiple Razors in the past. Except the difference with this one is it is 48 watts instead of the 18 watt that I have on my MX650, which is crazy bright already. And you really don't need much more than that 18 watt headlight, but let's see how bright we can get this thing. Also using a Nilight mounting bracket kit to mount this light bar onto the fork right between the triple tree clamps. And of course, 22 gauge wiring, multiple connectors, heat shrink to create the harness to make everything work. So here I've got a 9-volt battery just for demonstration purposes, since the taillight wiring can look a little bit intimidating since there's 5 wires coming out of it. But it's actually much simpler than it looks. Black is obviously ground. The red is the brake lamp, and then the green is a constant 12 volt. So whenever the headlight is on, I'm going to have this turned on. And then the yellow and the brown wire, I'm actually not hooking up on this bike, but yellow is for the right turn signal and the brown is for the left turn signal. So we're only hooking up these 3 wires. So what I'm thinking is, since the top of this housing is pretty flat, it should have no problem sitting inside this fender, but the back side of the fender is curved, so it's a little bit awkward how it butts up like this. I'm actually going to cut about 1 inch off the rear edge just so it's a flat edge against a flat edge, and I think it'll look a lot cleaner, sunken in a little bit. Here's what the headlight looks like mounted. Close-up of the mount between the triple tree clamps. On-off switch. And then the tail lamp assembly has had 30 minutes to cure now. The adhesive still looks a little wet, but it's completely dry to touch at this point. It's not perfect, but I think it looks pretty good. Here's what that tail lamp and rear fender look like mounted on the bike. And then I'm gonna run the harness under the seat. Just be careful you don't have it all the way to the edge of the frame. Otherwise it's gonna get pinched when you fold the seat down. It's gotta be about 1 inch away from the edge. And then I'm gonna run it down here to the controller area. Here's the simplified wiring diagram that I drew up to help explain how I'm hooking everything up. Feel free to screenshot this or pause the video. But basically the voltage step-down converter, the red and the black wire are obviously gonna go to the battery or share the same post as the controller. It's already got a built-in inline fuse. And then the yellow wire is gonna be the 12-volt outlet. And then ground. This ground, I'm pretty much gonna be sharing everything from the switch to the headlight to the taillight. And then the signal wire is gonna go to the red wire on the switch. That's gonna be the constant 12-volt power source. And then from the switch, there's a white wire. So whenever you turn it on, it'll send 12-volt out to the headlight and to the brake lamp. I'm gonna hook that up to the green wire on the taillight, which is the running lamp. And then I'm teeing off a constant 12-volt power source to the brake lamp switch, since I want the brake light to work regardless if the headlights or running lamps are on. All the brake switch does on the lever is complete a circuit, so it's gonna stay broken until you activate it. I'm actually planning on mounting the voltage step-down converter in this area, since that seems to be the only space in the frame that I can put it, that it's well protected from all the elements and still goes to the controller pretty easily. I also often get asked how I connect to my far driver controller through my phone, and that is because I have a far driver Bluetooth dongle that's constantly hooked up. I just leave it on so I can make changes whenever I turn the bike on. I can open my app and make changes if I need. So I'm gonna remove these two screws and take this cover off so we can access the terminals. We're gonna be replacing this QS8 connector with the original one, since this is what's gonna go for the stock battery. And then we're also going to share the same two posts for the power supply for the voltage step-down converter. Now this battery I get the most questions about because it happens to perfectly fit the Tuttio. The most common one is, how do you buy an Amorge battery? You have to reach out to them by email. I think it's info@amorge.com, or you can reach out to Kenny directly. I can't really send you a link to purchase this battery. I emailed them because I wanted this for my Razor MX500 in the past. You just got to give them the dimensions and BMS specs that you're looking for, and they'll be able to quote you. The other common question I get about this battery is, what are the exact dimensions? The length is 8.5, width is 5.5, height is 6 inches. So 8.5 by 5.5 by 6. Using some 3/16 short rivets mounted onto the panel. Just like that. This is not going anywhere. So it should be pretty easy to figure out which one the brake switch is, since there are only two sets of wires coming from the bottom side of the fork. Well, one's gonna be for the throttle, one's gonna be for the brake signal switch. And if we look down here, this one that has a black and yellow wire coming out of it, that has to be the brake signal switch because there's no such thing as a 2-wire throttle. So I'm gonna use these 2 wires to complete a circuit for the brake lamp. Just for shits, I took out the stock battery from my Roar Mantis X, which is a 72 volt, 30 amp hour, just to see if we can somehow fit it in this frame. Looks kind of at home in there. It's only like a 1/4 inch of play on both sides and frame. And being 5'8", it's not like I'm gonna sit that far forward. Maybe if I get that Socian motor when it finally comes out, I might get motivated to modify the front portion of the seat to fit something like this.
What I did for the taillight wiring is I just snipped off the connector for the yellow and brown wires, and then I extended the green, red, and black wires so it reaches the controller area, and then I just wrapped it with some wiring loom just to make sure that it's well protected. This is the 12-volt power wire and ground wire. I'm gonna route it outside the frame because I'm gonna do majority of my wiring there. And then the positive and the negative power supply terminals are gonna share the same terminals on the controller as the battery. It's definitely a pain in the ass to do and trying to get a camera angle for you guys at the same time. The only things I'm gonna have sticking out of this notch are the Bluetooth connector and the connector for the battery. Here's where I'm gonna do majority of my wiring. I'm just gonna replicate the connections that I have on this diagram. You wanna do this with the handlebar turned to the right, just to make sure we're gonna do it in the stretched position. We wanna make sure at the end of this that there's gonna be plenty of slack. So when you're turning your handlebar left and right, it doesn't pull on any of the wiring. Here's a closer look at what we did. There's just these two main wires, black and red, that are going to the voltage step-down converter. So this is the 12-volt supply for everything. This yellow and black wire down here was the brake signal switch to the controller, but all it does now is complete a circuit when the brake is depressed. Then it sends 12 volts to the red wire going to the taillight. Then the power supply is just going to this red wire going to the switch, and when you turn it on, the white wire is going to supply 12 volts to the red wire going to the headlight and the green wire going to the taillight. And here's a closer look at how it cleaned up. I have it zip tied to the controller bracket at the bottom, but it's actually got plenty of slack. Stock battery fit in just fine. Here's the harness on the left side of it. All right, moment of truth. Look at that. There we go. So headlight, wow, that is definitely the brightest headlight I've had so far. Taillight, brake lamp, functioning whenever I press it. It's a success, guys. And the brake light also still works whenever the headlight's turned off. Man, that's like super wide angle. Okay, it's showing 54.9 volts, which is like 95% full charge. Got the Far Driver app opened up here. I already changed the voltage setting to 48, which will automatically change the low voltage and high voltage thresholds within the settings. I'm not really changing anything else on my setup though. I'm just going to leave the max line current at 60 amps, 240 phase amps, and I'm going to leave everything else the same within my last tune. Ah, shit. Well, that kind of changes our plans. I wasn't expecting it to start snowing so early. Is it irresponsible to try to do a top speed run in these kind of conditions? Definitely, but we gotta do what we gotta do sometimes. Oh my God, guys, it is way too cold. I was not expecting it to snow this early on today, and I am getting drenched in my sweatpants, so we gotta head back in a little bit.
This is what the Tuttio Soleil should have came like from the factory. All right, so the official top speed for the Tuttio, tuned with a 48 volt and a sprocket, is just 40 miles per hour, which is pretty much exactly what I expected it to be.
Dang, I was really hoping to ride around for a little bit longer today, but unfortunately the snow is like a really wet snow. So I was just getting drenched and the streets are super slippery. So I'm just gonna save it for another time. Obviously, I just set up my Tuttio back to 48 volts for testing purposes, but I think I do wanna set this bike up for 60 or 72 volts again, though I am looking at that Socian motor that just came out, which means I would need to upgrade the battery and the controller, which means this is another budget that we're gonna blow through. But if you guys have any other questions, make sure you comment them down below. Maybe we can figure them out together. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a favor and hit that like button. If you like this kind of content, wanna keep up with some of my projects, such as the Tuttio, my Razors, my Roar Mantis, my Talaria, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn your bell notification on. But this is gonna be it for today. Thank you for watching.